It's a good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millsy, back with Hometown Commander, back for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I bring you my version 1.0 deck list of the commander in front of us on my quest to brew the magic world. As always, that deck list is going to be down in the description for you below, as well as I'd really appreciate it if you could interact with the video, like, comment, subscribe, consider checking the links out in the description. I'd really appreciate it. The motto is ABB, baby, always be brewing, and that's what we look to do. Today we're updating Morska Undersea Sleuth. This one came out back in Murders of Karlov Manor, but I think there's been some interesting updates for it that have come out over the last few months since we took a look at it. So I wanted to update especially a couple new cards from Foundations. Morska Undersea Sleuth is a Bant Vidalcan Fish Detective 2/3. It says we have no maximum hand size. At the beginning of our upkeep, we're going to investigate, so we make a clue token. Whenever we draw our second card each turn, we put 2 counters on Morska. The thing I've always liked about Morska is that I feel like it's just a pile of value. Everything on it wants to do the things you already wanted to do. It's going to pay off drawing. It's going to pay off clues. It pays off counters. It pays off a lot of things. I think it just buttons it up into a really nice package. If you're looking for a deck that wants to draw cards and have some fun, make a Morska unblockable and hit for big damage, get to use artifacts in fun ways, I think Morska's a really nice playground for it, and let's jive with it. First off, we're going to talk about draw matters. I think in a lot of ways, there's a lot of magic cards that say when you draw your second card each turn, do X. And since Morska already cares about it, why not play more creatures that care about it? Alondra makes you a Drake. Detective of the Month makes you a detective, and as long as you have the City's Blessing, detectives you control can't be blocked, which is going to make Morska unblockable. Ethereal Investigator makes a spirit and comes in and makes you clues for each opponent you have. The relevant thing about Alondra to mention is that if you draw your 5th card each turn, it actually gives all your Drakes a +X or X number of cards in your hand. So because Morska gives us an infinite hand size, we can be, if we want to draw that many, we can still profit from it. One of the new cards from Foundations, Homunculus Horde, will happily play. Whenever we draw our second card each turn, we get a copy of it, allowing us to go wide like the rest of these token makers. Joriel makes a cat whenever we draw our second card each turn, but for 6 mana, all of our creatures can become XXs, or X the number of cards in our hand, basically turning our board into huge creatures for the more cards in our hand we have, which is a great top-end ability to use later in the game. Min is going to make a bunch of 1/1 illusions, and they get +1/+1 for each other illusion we control. And then, a fun ability, whenever an illusion we control dies, we can put a permanent with mana value less than or equal to that creature's power from our hand on the battlefield. So at minimum a land, otherwise potentially more than that as they die. With things like Private Eye, where we draw our second card each turn, target detective can't be blocked this turn, which can give Morska some unblockability. Knowledge and Power is going to give all of our creatures a buff for each card we've drawn this turn. So especially on our turn, they're going to get a big buff. And then Prof's Eidetic Memory comes in, draws us a card. We have no maximum hand size again, so even if Morska leaves the battlefield, we want to still have other ways to have no maximum hand size. And beginning our combat, if we've drawn more than 1 card this turn, we put X counters on a target creature, where X is the number of cards we've drawn minus that first one for turn that we get automatically. So Profs is a great way to start spreading around counters onto our creatures, whether it be Morska or other creatures, depending on how we decide it. But let's talk about the clues, because right, Morska makes a clue every turn. The clue says we could pay 2 mana, sack it to draw a card. There is a very easy way to get a second card each turn. So why don't we pay off either clues happening or clues leaving, right? Forensic Gadgeteer says whenever we cast an artifact spell, we investigate. We do have some artifacts in the deck, right? So we're going to get some extra clues that way. But the big one here is that activated abilities of artifacts you control cost 1 less to activate. So our clue is going to go from 2 down to just 1 mana to use. And that's great. So we can use our extra mana for other things on our turn. We're playing a pair of Lonuses. Lonuses Cryptozoologist, the old one, says whenever another non-token creature enters, we get to investigate. And we can actually sack X clues to look at an opponent's libraries. We get the X cards off the top. We can put a non-land permanent with mana value X or less among them on the battlefield. So we could steal something potentially for all these clues that we have. I don't think I'm going to use that too often in a deck like this, but it is a great option to have late game. I think you really care about getting more clues. But the Lonus I really like is Lonus Genetics Expert. It says whenever one or more counters are put on Lonus, we get to investigate that many times. And then whenever we sacrifice a clue, we get to put a counter on another creature you control. This is a ability that may look odd, but there are actually creatures that let us do things whenever we make tokens. So there are 2 creatures in this deck that we could play that I believe we'll talk about in the counters section, that make counters whenever a token comes in under our control. Well, that can then put a counter on Lonus and start making us a ton of clues, near infinite, depending on how long we want to go, to be able to use for a lot of other effects. So Lonus is a great one for the deck. Martha Jones says that when it comes in, we investigate, but whenever we sacrifice a clue, it and up to one other creature can't be blocked this turn. A great way to make Morska unblockable, again, to get in for big damage. Piper Wright, that whenever it deals combat damage to a player, we get that many clues. And whenever we sacrifice a clue, we put a counter on a creature we control. So this is nice, right? Too. Whenever we sacrifice a clue, we can start adding counters onto creatures. Senator Peacock from the Clue Edition makes all of our artifacts into clues, which isn't bad. This means that any foods we make or any other things we make, because we do have some cards in the deck that make foods, they will turn into clues. But whenever we sacrifice a clue, target creature can't be blocked this turn. So this is nice for Morska, but it's also nice for other creatures we may have laying around that can get bigger and want to get things. We have things like Tangle Grove Kelp. This came in the deck and is a great finisher for us at the beginning of each combat, not just ours. Other clues we control become 6/6 plants in addition to their other types until end of turn, basically animating all of our clues into creatures and allowing them to attack. And Tangle Grove is also a clue, so it's going to count for all of those abilities. 500-Year Diary from the Doctor Who set comes in tap. We get to tap for a blue for each clue we control, which is really useful. Start making a ton of mana each turn. And then it's a clue, so we can always sack it to draw a card. And I think my favorite clue payoff is Tamio's Journal. Start every turn, we get to make a clue, so that's 2 clues with it and Morska out. Tap, sacrifice 3 clues, just go get any cards you want from your library and put it into your hand. Here's a way to tutor up the right cards you need by just getting rid of the clues and start working your way towards any of the different lines you want to go. Whether it be the draw combos, whether it be the unblockability on Morska, there's a lot of ways you can take the deck, and I think it's fun to kind of have 2 or 3 ways we can take the deck and see what you can get access to, right, during each game. We can make Morska unblockable. We talked about it with Detective of the Month. We talked about it with Martha, but there is other ways to do it. Canine can make a creature unblockable by tapping itself, and as long as it's untapped, we can give legendary creatures Ward 1. Enter the Enigma and Slip Through Space for just 1 mana can make Morska unblockable and draw us a card, fulfilling the 2nd card per turn. So they're great, right? Fulfilling 2 things we want them to do and drawing us a card for it. There is some way to pay off the counters going on Morska and the counters going on other things. Danny Pink's a really fun one for this deck. It says creatures you control have whenever 1 or more counters are put on this creature for the first time, we get to draw a card. This is really nice because then we can start drawing more cards on our turn, start paying off things like Eidetic Memory or Alondra. It also has Mentor, so whenever it attacks, it can put a counter on a creature with lesser power, then triggering its ability, right, to draw us a card. Dust Shell Crawler gives all of our creatures with a counter on them trample, and it puts a counter on something when it comes in. And then the classic counter payoff, WinCon, Simic Ascendancy. Whenever 1 or more counters are put on a creature we control, we put that many growth counters on Simic Ascendancy. At the start of our turn, it has 20 or more. You win the game. So here's a way to pay off winning the game. Even if people keep removing Morska, we may be able to still build up the Ascendancy to win the game. But I think where we really marry the clue and the deck strategy or the draw strategies together is caring about artifacts, because we're going to have a ton of artifacts and we really want to make sure we're paying them off, and with some pretty classic things. Academy Manufacturer, whenever we would make a clue, food, or treasure, we make all 3 instead. This means that every time we investigate, we're making a food and treasure as well. Remember, treasures mean mana, so we can use them for that. Jaheira lets all of our tokens tap for green mana. All those clues can then tap and allow them to tap for mana, which is nice. The clues do not have to tap to sacrifice, if I recall correctly. So that should allow us to tap them for green mana. They do not have to tap to sacrifice. So that will allow us to tap them for green mana and then still sacrifice them if we need to draw a card. I like Junkwinder, a big 7 mana 5/6 with affinity for tokens, so it costs less for each token we have. And whenever a token comes in, we get to tap down an opponent's permanent that doesn't untap on their next turn. So a good way to just tap some key things down, stop someone from getting aggressive or stop someone from using a big mana rock or different things like that. Junkwinder's great, and it's going to come down for pretty cheap most of the time. One of those two token equals counters payoffs is Rosy Cotton of South Lane. When it comes in, we make a food. Whenever we create a token, we put a counter on a creature other than Rosy. So that works with Lonus, that works with Morska, right? Souping Morska up and getting it more counters. Third Doctor feels great here. It gets a +1/+1 for each non-token creature or non-creature token we control. So it's going to get big over time. And when it comes in, we can get a clue, food, or treasure. So again, Third Doctor can become a threat, having it have trample and a buff. It can start becoming a potential unblockability threat for our opponents to deal with. It's hard to talk about an artifact deck and not have an Urza laying around. And in this deck, we're going to play Urza Lord High Artificer, probably the most well-known Urza. A 4-mana 1/4 that says when it comes in, we make a construct that gets +1/+1 for each artifact we control. But the big two abilities on Urza that matter are you can tap an untapped artifact you control to add blue. This is important because Urza's tapping the artifact, not the artifact. So if it's an artifact that creature for some reason, they could still be tapped for mana. And then for 5 mana, you can shuffle your Library and exile the top card, and we can play that without paying its mana cost until end of turn. A great ability that once we get enough mana can be really useful to just continue to churn through for more and more good value. Yoshin Dissident is our other +1/+1 counter maker. Whenever an artifact comes in, put a counter on a creature you control. So there we go. There's that other payoff for Lonus. And then, two other ways to potentially push ourselves towards winning the game. Rise and Shine, a classic artifacts payoff when you are stacking a ton of them up. For 2 mana, can turn your choice of a non-creature artifact into a 4/4 artifact creature, but for 6 mana, can turn all of our non-creature artifacts into 4/4s. And again, as long as they didn't come in this turn, it means you can attack and get big damage into your opponent. And then Mechanized Production, another alternate win con for us. You enchant an artifact you control. At the beginning of your upkeep, you get a copy of that artifact, and then if you control 8 or more artifacts with the same name as one another, you win the game. Mechanized Production is a really fun card because you don't need 8 or more artifacts with the name as the thing you enchant to win. You just need anything. That means that obviously we can put this on clue and we're more likely to get 8 to 8 clues. But if we can just make a ton of clues and a bunch of foods and a bunch of treasures, there's a better chance that we have of potentially winning the game off the Mechanized Production. It's an interesting card and can really help you win the game if you get into a stally state where you can't attack with Morska to win, but you can still net enough artifacts to make production a problem. We've said it before on the show, and we'll say it again. No deck's ever complete. This is my version, not my version 1.0 shut at Morska, but this is my update to Morska. And there still would be a lot to learn in testing, which is, do we have the things we need? Mainly, can we close the game out, and can we draw enough cards to really do what we want to do? And that's what I hope that these 3 cards would do for us. Cyberdrive Awakener is another version of Rise and Shine. The difference is it's a creature. When it comes in, it turns them all in until end of turn, and it gives them all flying, which I think is the thing that does make it a teeny bit better than Rise and Shine. The reason I didn't add it in just on first call was I think there's a lot of other ways for us to win rather than this Rise and Shine ability, but I could definitely agree with the argument that it needs to come back in immediately. I just think we have 2 of them already. We have Rise and Shine. We have the Tangle Grove Kelp. The question is, are we going wide enough with these clues every time to make them worth it? And that's something we'd want to see in testing. Shimmer Dragon can allow us to tap 2 untapped artifacts we control to draw a card. So it can let us tap the clues and the foods and the treasures to draw cards, which is important. I like the ability. The question is, are we doing enough drawing already? Do we have enough card draw power? And if we don't, maybe we bring Shimmer Dragon in as a way to, draw more cards. And then Worldwalker Helm, to me, just seems really interesting. If you'd make 1 or more artifact tokens, you make those tokens plus a map. A map is an artifact token with 1 tap, sack it to have a creature we control explore. The way exploring works is you reveal the top. If it's a land, you put it into our hand. If it's a non-land, you get your choice. You can either put it back on top or you can put it into your graveyard, and whichever of those 2 you choose, you put a counter on that creature. I like this because the maps I think are could be really useful. churning through the lands and making sure we're really always getting into the gas of our deck. And then for 2 mana, we can just make a copy of another token if we need to. So I like everything on the helm. I'm just not sure if it's a slam dunk like some of the other cards that are in the deck, and that will basically just kind of stop me from putting it in. Well, let's get into playtest number 1. Keeping 3 lands to get into that Morska on turn 3. Garruk's Uprising can get us some draw or give all our creatures trample. All That Glitters gives the enchanted creature +1/+1 for each artifact and enchantment you control, so a really big buff. Dispatch is a instant that just taps a creature, but if we have 3 or more artifacts, it exiles that creature instead. Basically, as soon as we get 3 artifacts, this becomes a Path to Exile or a Swords, and we actually do have a path as well. So we got some removal, we've got some key buffs. I think this isn't a bad hand. We see Brotherhood Regalia. So this is a card that can give Morska Ward 2 and not able to be blocked. So great equipment for Morska to be a threat to our opponents. We'll get it down now since it doesn't automatically attach itself or anything. We'll just get it down so it can be ready. We'll play the Deserted Beach and get Morska down. We want to get Morska started because obviously we want to make sure we get those clues going. Here on turn 4, we could crack the clue. We also don't mind keeping the clue around, right? We have a tap land and an untapped land. I don't mind the idea of K9 here. I could do this K9 and crack the clue to draw a card, get some counters. I could do this K9 equip and crack the counter and to draw a card, right? There's a couple options there. If I do this, I'm down on mana next turn, but I think that makes the most sense. Tap the Regalia, sack the clue to draw. That's going to put 2 counters on Morska. Now Morska's hitting it as a 4/5. Now K9's also going to give us some unblockability. But what I like now is it's giving Morska an extra ward 1, so it's ward 3 at the moment. So it's going to be pretty hard to target. And then we draw Rosy Cotton, which isn't bad. Again, a way to start putting counters right when we make tokens. We make that clue at the start of our turn, so now we've got 4 mana. If I put Garruk's Uprising down, I do draw, and it would give my creatures trample. My question is that what I want to do this turn? I could play Rosy and leave up removal. Rosy would make a food token. I'd put the counter on Morska, and then Dispatch would be online. Or I could just draw with Garruk's Uprising. I kind of like the idea of Rosy. Make the food. Put the counter on Morska. We didn't draw our second turn, but that's okay. Morska's still a 5/6 that can't be blocked. It's going to attack in. And now Rosy's going to keep getting us extra counters and extra turns, right? Because we come into the next turn, make a clue. I guess I could put it on K9 or somebody else to start growing the board, right? Make it more of a threat. But now, right, we still have Dispatch online. I'm kind of thinking Garruk's Uprising. That draws us the card, right, off of us having a power 4 greater when it comes in. That is going to cause our second draw, giving Morska to get a couple more counters. I think then I would just play Jolriel. We're a little bit late on Jolriel getting the token this turn, but I think that's okay. We could have just played it before Garruk's Uprising if we were smart, but no harm, no foul there in the grand scheme of things. Morska's now attacking is a 7/8 with unblockable. Ward 3, we can get an attack in here. Jolriel's going to start making us those cats, but really, I feel like her ability to give all of our creatures base power XX is going to be good, because then instead of a 2/3, right, Morska would be whatever her hand is and could be an even bigger attacker, right, as our opponents have to start dealing with the value we're generating. Make a clue. I think I'll put it on Jolriel this time just to get the process started, right, making sure that we're getting good value. Put the land in. I was thinking, what, do we crack the clue? Put All That Glitters on Morska and just threaten to really hurt our opponents this turn, right? Draw. Counter. Make a cat. We'll put the counter on Jolriel, I guess. And then my thought is All That Glitters on Morska. Morska's getting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6. So it's a 15 right now. If it didn't knock the person we've been attacking out, it's going to knock that person out this turn, and now people are in a real threat. We still have enough mana up this turn for our removal. And we're just sitting pretty, right? All the rest of our creatures do have trample if we want to start attacking with them, but the point is, I think the value board states here. We've shown it, we've got to it, and we'll move into the next one. And we want to get to those board state where Morska keeps growing, becoming a threat. We try to find as much of that value around it as we can and push in for the win. Here we're keeping a 3-lander with that Ethereal Investigator, Martha, Homunculus Horde, and Idle Oblivion. Card that can draw us a card number and make a token. This is really great with Morska because that means on each of our turns, Morska's making the clue, which can immediately let us draw without sacrificing the clue, right? Which can be relevant. Put the Scattergroves in tap turn 1, since this can come in untap now with the Scattergroves down. I don't think there's anything we can do turn 1 anyway. Turn 2 is the choice. Do we play the Idol or do we play the Simic Ascendancy? I like the idea of the Idol because if we spend next turn playing Morska, then the turn after we can draw with it, right? So turn 3 here, play the Forest into Morska, right? Now this turn, we make the clue. Now I can tap Idle Oblivion just to draw because of the token getting made, and that means that Morska could get the counters. Now I could have, put somebody else down to take advantage of the draw, but we didn't have the mana. We just now found the mana with Archway, but it comes in tapped, unfortunately, because we don't have another island. So it's going to come in tapped. I guess the question is, do we do something like Simic or do we do something like Farseek to get us up another piece of mana to get us, going forward? Like, I like Martha for my 3 mana, but I really want to get myself up into some more mana, right, to be able to play multiple things. So I think I just Farseek. We'll go get the Spar's Headquarters we should have laying in the deck for some extra mana. I guess we could have Farseeked before that and had the Archway come in untapped. But it's fine. I don't think that's going to matter. The point is we're setting up for next turn, getting mana, and getting the party going. So we'll draw for this turn, get that clue. We can tap the Oblivion to draw a card, but we have 5 mana. We could play something like the Horde and get another Horde out of it. We could get the Ethereal down and get a Spirit out of it. I don't want to just tap the Idol and draw right away if we can make sure that we get some other value out of it. 5 mana is a good amount of mana. I'm thinking maybe like Profs plus Martha, Simic Ascendancy plus Martha. There's a lot of options for what we can play this turn. I like Martha because it can start making Morska unblockable when it comes in. We get another clue. My thought here with either of these is either way we're profiting from tapping out of Oblivion. So I'm thinking the Ascendancy. Tap the Oblivion to draw a card. That puts 2 counters on Morska, right? Which puts 2 counters on the Ascendancy. Now we get the Ascendancy going. We didn't sack a clue, so Martha doesn't give it unblockable, but I think a 6/7 still gets a good attack in here. Work our way in next turn. Make another clue, right? Now Idle Oblivion can tap again. This turn we'll see again, what can we put down? I think the Diary makes sense now because it's going to start tapping for a ton of blue mana. The only unfortunate thing is that we just can't use it this turn, right? Like, that's the only downside of the Diary is if we play it, our turn's basically gone to just playing the Diary. But it is a very good one. And now we do have the option of something like Archway of Innovation, which allows us to use our clues to tap to pay for our next spell. So we could do that, tap a couple of clues for this to come down for only 1 mana. Right. And then we have 2 mana left. Do we have enough blue left? Blue into that. We wouldn't have enough blue left to play anything else. So the question is, do we just hard cast it, or do we just play something like Homunculus Horde and get it started? Because we have the second draw, right? No matter what, with Idle Oblivion. I love the idea of getting Profs down, but I have no way of getting Proft and any of these other blue things. I guess you could do Proft plus plus Piper, but I really want to get the Diary down this turn. So let's do that. Maybe we'll draw into a land and fix our luck. We don't. A couple counters on Morska. A couple counters on Simic Ascendancy. Again, take the big attack here. Now next turn the diary can be untapped to get us a bunch of mana. Make a clue, play our land for turn. So now we're at 6. And now all the clues can make this tap for 6, right? Because it's a clue itself. So we have 12 mana now. So that was why I really wanted to get that done, so we could hit that big Eclipse in mana. So Alondra for 4, Horde for 4. Profs for 2. Tap the Idol Oblivion to draw, right? 2 counters on Morska. 2 counters on the Ascendancy. Make a Drake. Make a Homunculus Horde. And then Profs would go to combat, getting 1 extra counter. We'll put it on, I guess, something like Alondra, which would put another counter on Simic Ascendancy. Take the attack. This would I have had enough to crack a clue? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. We could have cracked a clue to make Morska unblockable. So that was an option there with Martha. But again, I think we're in a good spot here. We've got a good value board set up. Now it's just using our mana turn over turn to push this through. More counters on Morska, more value on the battlefield. Get Morska unblockable, get it bigger, have it become a real threat. So let's get into playtest number 3. Even a 3-lander with Martha again. Enter the Enigma for some unblockability. There's Detective of the Month for that unblockability as well. And Dust Shell Crawler for some trample. So not a bad one turn when we draw Soul Ring. Okay, well that does that change our mind? None of our lands come in untapped, so I guess that it's just gonna come in, right? We're just gonna, I guess, have to Path of Ancestry turn 1. Turn 2, I guess we'll play the Deserted Beach in tapped and get the Soul Ring down. Man, it's awkward that they don't come. All 3 of them came in tapped. But that's just what happens sometimes when you're using certain lands. Here, I think we more scry 1 off the Path of Ancestry, like the Archway, although it's going to come in tapped as well. I don't have anything for the 2 mana, so we'll just kind of move to the next turn, get our clue. Do Detective plus crack the clue, right? If I put this Force in untapped, I could do Detective, Martha plus Detective, but I can't crack the clue. Let's do Detective and then crack the clue to draw. It'd be 2 counters on Morska. And then we make a Detective token, right? We're at 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 permanents. So we're almost to the City's Blessing to give Morska unblockable, but that's okay. I think it is a 4 or 5, still takes an attack here. Turn 5, I think we put in the tap land, because I think either of them are tapped, right, no matter what. We've got 6 mana at our disposal. We ideally might need 2 of it to crack a clue, but let's see. Danny would get us some extra card draw, right? Danny, crack the clue, counters, draw, right? Another Detective, so now we're up to 10, so now Morska's unblockable. We draw Lonely Sandbar, which is a land we can bring in tapped, or we can pitch it to draw a card. I like this. I think we're seeing the value mount. Now we're up to 8 mana. We'll play an untap land this turn, because I'm thinking we get the clue. Rosie makes the food. We'll put the counter, since Morska is going to kind of counter this turn no matter what, right? We'll put it on Detective, drawing us a card. That's going to trigger Morska, right? Getting 2 counters, drawing us a card because of Danny and making us another Detective. Now we've still got 5 mana left. Maybe we go something like Knowledge of Power. We've drawn, 2 cards this turn, so everybody gets a little bit of a buff. If we attack this turn, Danny could put a counter on Detective of the Month, or even one of the detectives as a mentor. So let's say he does that. That draws us another card, gives them a little bit of a buff. And we could pitch, something to hand size here. Maybe something like the Enigma. Well, the Enigma draws this card. And now I think we're in good shape. We come in here to turn 7, make another clue. All we want to do is draw, right? I guess Archway and tap, still at 8 mana. A lot of things we could put down. Private Eye could make another Detective unblockable, but remember that Detective of the Month already makes them unblockable. So I'm thinking what? Homunculus Horde. Tamio's Journal, right? To be able to search. Shell Crawler, put a counter on Danny. Draw. When we draw, 2 counters on Morska. Draw. Make the detective because of Detective of the Month. Now all detectives are unblockable. Take another big attack. They're getting a good buff because we've drawn a couple cards this turn. And I think, we can extrapolate here. We got protection with the Clever Concealment now. I think we can make this, this spot work. But let me know, what do you think of the updated Morska? Again, just some pieces from Foundations really help. I think just a little bit more consistency. I think the deck still, to me, seems fun. It might be a deck I might resurrect and try again. We'll see how I'm feeling. But let me know what you think of Morska, and I catch you guys next time.